What's going on, folks? I'm Abby Martin, and this is Breaking the Set. Few people give the origin of their food a second thought. And while corporate factory farms are rightfully at the forefront of the discussion, very little is known about where the federal government fits in when it comes to promoting animal abuse. But a New York Times investigation from last month just uncovered horrific practices taking place at a federal Frankenstein farm in Nebraska. See, the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center was funded by Congress 50 years ago to conduct research on breeding animals more efficiently. But according to FOIA-requested documents, as well as interviews with current and former employees, the experiments and conditions at the center are downright depraved. For example, scientists are operating on pigs' brains and ovaries to make them even more fertile, so that they'll have up to 14 piglets at a time, leading mothers to roll over on top of them and crush their babies. Cows are being engineered to have twins and triplets, leading to deformed and sickly calves. And sheep are being injected with so much testosterone that their lambs are being born with deformed genitals. Since 1985, at least 6,500 animals have starved to death at the center. You know, it's one thing when private factory farms engage in abysmal treatment against living, breathing creatures, but siphoning 22 million taxpayer dollars annually to enable this brutality under the guise of benefiting consumers is a whole new level of outrageous. Now let's break the set. For animal rights activists in the U.S., one of the major targets is animal lab testing. According to PETA, each year, more than 100 million animals, from rats to monkeys, are killed in lab experiments across the country. Joining me now to discuss the abuse animals endure everywhere is no new animal lab. That was a mouthful. Organizer Jay Johnson. Thanks for coming back on, Jay.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So let's talk about the campaign from No New Animal Lab against a plan at the University of Washington to expand their testing facility. Tell us about that.
Certainly. Yeah, this campaign really sort of began more locally with students at the University of Washington trying to stop this lab from being built. The university plans to expand their current animal testing with a new underground facility that will more than double the amount of animals that they use. And despite the fact that a number of the students, the majority of the student body, in fact, opposed this in a kind of rubber stamp public meeting, they approved the lab, and now we're trying to do everything we can to stop it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, this is not the only lab, especially in universities. I mean, what types of animals are kept in these facilities across the country, and what types of research are they used for?
So, I mean, it can be anything, in all honesty. Like, monkeys are of common use, but as well as dogs and cats and mice and rats, and really anything you can think of are in labs around the country. And in terms of the type of research, it can really be anything from medical experimentation to, you know, household products and pesticides.
What are they doing at this lab at the University of Washington?
I mean, they're doing a number of experimentations, and the University of Washington really prides itself on being a quote-unquote leader in scientific research, and that's really one of the things that makes the expansion of this lab so egregious to us is when others, you know, other universities such as Harvard are phasing out animal testing and relying more on non-animal models, the University of Washington is looking to double the size of their lab, you know, and bring in more animals. And rather than focusing on this antiquated and unethical animal testing, we feel that really they should, if they want to be leaders, be focusing on models that do not use animals and that are more effective for treating human diseases, as well as more effective in the terms of not causing any suffering or death to non-human animals.
And let's talk specifically about monkeys there, because it's pretty egregious what's happening. What is going on? How is the testing affecting these monkeys psychologically and physically?
I mean, obviously monkeys are highly intelligent creatures, and you see a lot of really bad things, not just due to the confinement in terms of, you know, self-mutilation and, you know, ripping out of your own hair, just due to the psychological damage that comes from being confined and being tested on. But you've also seen a number of negligent treatment citations coming down from the USDA against the University of Washington specifically. Most recently, only a few months ago, in December of 2014, the lab was charged with negligence and fined by the USDA for the deaths of 3 infant primates that were killed by other animals within the lab, which again is also not natural behavior necessarily, but due to the confinement and due to the horrible conditions that they're living in within these laboratories.
So why not target the university instead of the construction company that's extending this laboratory?
Well, both is happening. I think both are important, and that's why this campaign really sort of started locally with people focusing on the university, but unfortunately, the university didn't listen to its student body and contracted construction group Skanska USA to build this lab. And we really feel that, one, the university should be targeted, but also we feel like we have a good wedge issue here to stop this lab from being built before it happens. And Skanska is a great target for that, because while this is a $90 million contract, in the grand scheme of things, they're one of the biggest construction companies in the world. They bring in billions of dollars in revenue, so $90 million is really a drop in the bucket for them. And furthermore, they pride themselves on being a forward-thinking and sustainable, business that engages in ethical business practices. So we're really holding their feet to the fire on that and saying, like, if you're really forward-thinking and if you're really trying to be an ethical business, why are you taking on this contract and why are you building this lab that is engaging in these barbaric and antiquated animal experimentations?
45 seconds left. Of course, a lot of people will respond to you saying, how else are we supposed to test products to make them safe for humans? Your response?
And my response, again, would be that if you look at the way the industry is going, animal testing has not proved effective. They've been doing animal testing for as long as I can remember, and in terms of actual big breakthrough cures, there haven't really been that many. But with computer models and with things like that, and with universities as prestigious as Harvard turning more to those ways of testing things, I feel like there is both a more effective and a more ethical way to test these things and to try and both save animals and cure diseases within humans.
Totally agree with that. Thank you so much, Jay Johnson, organizer with No New Animal Lab. I got to write that down. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
While factory farming and animal testing are indeed heinous practices, many animal rights activists argue there's simply no room for reform within these industries and instead advocate for animal abolition. One such man is Gary Francione, the first professor to teach a course on animal rights theory at an American law school. He joined me earlier and I first asked him to explain what animal abolition is.
The theory of animal abolition is basically the name that I give to my brand, as it were, of animal ethics. And it's my position that the overwhelming number of organizations in this country, animal protection organizations in this country, promote something called animal welfare. That is, they focus on the treatment of animals, and they maintain that the focus ought to be humane treatment. My position is we cannot justify using animals at all, and so therefore it really isn't a question of treating animals humanely. Obviously, imposing less harm is better than imposing more harm, but my position, it's better to beat the slaves 10 times a week rather than 11 times a week, but that doesn't address the underlying question of the legitimacy of slavery as an institution. And that's more or less the way I think about the animal question, that we really cannot justify using animals. So we ought not to be focusing on making that treatment more humane, because we can't do it anyway. Animals are property, and there will always be structural limitations because of that economic reality that animals are property. There'll always be structural limitations that will keep the level of animal welfare very, very low. So it's not really possible to achieve anything remotely resembling humane treatment, whatever that means, in any event. But that the most important moral question, the theoretical question, the moral question is, can we justify using animals at all? And the answer is no, we can't. As far as factory farming is concerned, I mean, I wouldn't say that factory farming is the only problem. My view is it's all farming, all animal agriculture is a problem. Obviously, factory farming imposes more suffering than other forms of animal agriculture, but there's plenty of suffering and lots of death on the old family farm that we romanticize about. So it's not really a question of treatment, it's a question of use, and it's my position that we cannot justify using animals, so we just ought to stop.
And journalist Chris Hedges agrees with you. Last year, he announced in an article that he was going vegan. In it, he writes, "We have only a few years left at best to make radical changes to save ourselves from ecological meltdown. A person who is vegan will save 1,100 gallons of water, 20 pounds CO2 equivalent, 30 square feet of forested land, 45 pounds of grain, and one sentient animal's life every day. We do not, given what lies ahead of us, have any other option. Gary, my question is, how can we realistically move people to change their lifestyles to save animals when they don't even seem to be moved by the fact that people are getting killed by their tax dollars on a daily basis here?
I really do think that most of us do care about other humans. We may not have all the information that we need to have to make considered decisions, and we may not be able to. Our political system is rather difficult to change or to move. The one thing I really like about veganism is it's something that you don't need anybody else to do it. It's a decision that you can make yourself and you can implement it yourself. And I do think that people care about other people. Maybe not enough, but they do care about other people. And I do think that people care a lot about animals. I mean, almost everybody who's listening to your show tonight probably lives with or has lived with a non-human animal that she or he loved or loves very, very much and regards very much as a member of the family. There is no moral distinction, no morally coherent distinction between the animals we love and the animals that we eat. I mean, look, Abby, at that matter that came up. It's still going on now. That young man, Andre Robinson, who kicked the cat in Brooklyn. People are very angry with him, and obviously what he did is wrong. I'm not defending it in any way, but the reason why we don't like what he did is because we object to inflicting suffering on animals, particularly when we have no good reason, and where the only reason we have is getting some sort of kick or some sort of pleasure. But yet that's the best justification any of us has for eating animal foods. We don't need to eat animal products to be optimally healthy, and as Chris Hedges and others have pointed out, animal agriculture is an ecological disaster, and we don't need it. We don't need it for our health. It's an ecological disaster, and the best justification we have for imposing suffering and death on other beings is that we enjoy the taste. We like it. It's convenient. It's something that we do. That's not a good moral reason. And so my view is that really, it's not veganism that's extreme. It's not being vegan that's extreme. It goes against what most of us believe morally. It's hurting our health, and it's destroying the planet.
And let's get into that ecological aspect of it, because, of course, beyond the moral argument, I mean, climate change is, we always hear about pollution coming from cars. How much of a role does the agriculture industry play in climate change?
Well, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations came out with a study a couple of years ago and said that the amount of greenhouse gas that is produced as a result of animal agriculture exceeds that of what we get from burning fossil fuels for transport. And so, look, animal agriculture is a disaster. It's not only contributing to greenhouse gases, but it's responsible for water pollution. It's responsible for all sorts, for soil erosion, for all sorts of problems. I mean, it is just destroying the planet.
I know that you pointed out that tactics like the ones that pay to employees to get attention conflict with their overall goals. I mean, why do you find using sex to promote animal rights problematic?
Well, I mean, the problem is that speciesism is bad because it otherizes non-human animals in the same way that racism or sexism or heterosexism otherizes groups of human beings. So, it's my position that, I object to animal exploitation. It's speciesist for the same reason that I object to racism or sexism or heterosexism. It's very upsetting to me when I see these horrible campaigns that groups like PETA has, which I think are misogynistic. I mean, they're just beyond sexism. They're just plain misogyny. And I think that it upsets me because it makes I don't want people thinking that's the position that I'm promoting or that's where I'm coming from. Quite the contrary. I think these large organizations are basically trying to play to the media, and they'll take any position that they can take to get media attention. That's not what I think we ought to be doing.
Thank you so much, Gary Francione, animal abolitionist, professor at Rutgers University. Always amazing to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.